The Phoenix Principle, rising from rock bottom. Have you ever been so low that the only direction left was up? I recently had the privilege of interviewing Monic Harrish, a visionary whose raw insights on transformation have fundamentally changed how millions view resilience. What struck me most wasn't just her wisdom, but how she embodies the truth that our lowest moments can become the foundation for our greatest comebacks. Monica has dedicated her life to helping others see the potential within their pain, creating ripples of transformation that have touched communities across continents. The ground beneath your feet right now, it might feel solid, dependable, but what happens when that ground crumbles? When everything you've built your identity around, your career, your freedom, your reputation, suddenly vanishes? I used to think rock bottom was something to avoid at all costs. Now I understand it's often where the most profound transformations begin. 3 years ago, I attended a conference where a woman stood on stage and said something that made the entire room go silent. The day I went to prison was the day my real life began. You could hear a pin drop. We shifted uncomfortably in our seats, unprepared for that level of honesty, that complete reframing of what most would consider life's ultimate failure. That woman was Centoya Brown. At 16 years old, Centoya was sentenced to life in prison for killing a man who had solicited her for sex. A child tried as an adult, a victim of trafficking treated as a criminal. For 15 years, she lived behind bars in a Tennessee prison. But here's where her story takes an unexpected turn. While incarcerated, Centoya didn't just serve time, she transformed it. She earned her associate's degree. She participated in counseling programs. She wrote about her experiences. She built networks with advocacy groups. When she was finally granted clemency after widespread public support, she emerged not as a broken woman, but as an author, an advocate, and the founder of the JFM Foundation, focused on justice, freedom, and mercy. During our interview, Monic Harrish emphasized this exact principle. Your past does not define your future. Centoya's story exemplifies this truth in the most profound way. But let's be honest, most of us aren't facing life sentences. Our rock bottoms might look different: a divorce, a bankruptcy, a health crisis, a public failure. Yet the principle remains the same. What feels like an ending can become a beginning. I'm reminded of another remarkable woman I learned about through Monix's work, Jamila T. Davis. Jamila served nearly 10 years in federal prison for bank fraud. 10 years. That's 3,650 days of waking up in a cell, 3,650 days of being defined by your worst decision. For most people, that would be game over, career over, dreams over. But Jamila's lowest point came during solitary confinement. And it was there, in that tiny space with nothing but her thoughts, that she began to reimagine her future. She started writing books about financial literacy. She developed business plans. She studied. She prepared. When she was released, she faced all the barriers you'd expect for someone with a felony conviction: background checks that automatically disqualified her, doors that closed before she could even knock. So, what did she do? She built her own doors. Today, Jamila has founded the Women Over Incarcerated movement. She's authored multiple books used by correctional facilities nationwide. She's become a recognized advocate for criminal justice reform. As Monic Harrish pointed out in our conversation, embrace humility and use it as fuel for growth. Jamila's story is the embodiment of this principle. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. That's inspiring and all, but I haven't been to prison. How does this apply to me? Fair question. But here's the thing, we all have our own personal prisons. Maybe yours is a mindset that keeps you trapped in patterns of self doubt. Maybe it's a relationship where you've lost yourself. Maybe it's a career that slowly drained your soul while you weren't looking. The walls might look different, but the feeling of confinement is universal, and so is the potential for escape. Consider Susan Burton's story, which Monic highlighted as a powerful example of transformation. After the tragic death of her son, Susan cycled through addiction, homelessness, and incarceration 6 times. 6 times. Can you imagine hitting rock bottom not once, but repeatedly? Each time thinking you've learned your lesson, only to find yourself back in the same dark place? But on her sixth release from prison, something shifted. Susan realized there were no supportive services specifically designed to help Black women rebuild their lives after incarceration. So she created one. She started small, just one safe house. But that house became a new way of life reentry project, which has now helped more than 5,000 formerly incarcerated individuals find stable housing, employment, and family reunification. Susan didn't just escape her prison, she went back to help others escape theirs. And in doing so, she found her purpose. This brings me to the third principle Monic Harrish emphasized: live unapologetically in your truth. There's something powerful about owning every part of your journey, the good, the bad, and everything in between. When you stop hiding the chapters you're ashamed of, you discover they're often the most important parts of your story. I once attended a workshop where the facilitator asked everyone to write down their biggest failure on a piece of paper. Then she asked us to cross out the word failure and replace it with plot twist. It sounds simplistic, I know, but there's profound truth in that reframing. What if your rock bottom isn't the end of your story, but just the moment when the plot thickened? What if getting fired isn't a career ender, but the push you needed to finally start that business? What if that heartbreak isn't proof you're unlovable, but the clearing you needed to find someone who truly sees you? What if that public mistake isn't evidence of your incompetence, but the humbling that prepared you for authentic leadership? During our interview, Monic Harrish shared a quote that stopped me in my tracks. The phoenix doesn't rise despite the fire, it rises because of it. Think about that for a moment. The very thing that destroys also creates the conditions for rebirth. This isn't toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. I'm not suggesting we should be grateful for trauma or celebrate injustice. Some rock bottoms are the result of systemic failures that should never have happened. Some fires should have been prevented. But once you're in the ashes, you have a choice. You can remain there, or you can begin the painful, beautiful process of becoming something new. I believe this is what Monic Harrish means when she talks about embracing humility as fuel. Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about being honest about where you are so you can clearly see the path forward. When Centoya Brown was in prison, she didn't deny her reality. She acknowledged it and then asked, "What can I build from here?" When Jamila Davis was in solitary confinement, she didn't pretend she wasn't at rock bottom. She accepted it and then asked, "How can this transform me?" When Susan Burton kept cycling through addiction and incarceration, she didn't hide from her truth. She faced it and eventually asked, "How can my pain serve others?" These women embody what it means to live unapologetically in your truth, not just the pretty parts, but the whole messy, complicated reality. And here's what's fascinating: when they stopped apologizing for their past, they found the freedom to create their future. So, where do we go from here? What does this mean for you sitting in this audience today? Maybe you're at rock bottom right now. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle, comfortable but restless. Or maybe you're thriving, but there's a chapter of your story you keep hidden because you think it would change how people see you. I want you to imagine for a moment what would happen if we all had the courage to own our stories completely. If we stopped seeing our lowest moments as shameful secrets and started seeing them as the birthplace of our greatest strengths. What if we created a world where "I've been there too" replaced "I could never imagine"? Where vulnerability wasn't weakness, but the ultimate form of courage. I believe we stand at the edge of a revolution, not of technology or politics, but of human potential. A revolution that begins when we stop running from our rock bottoms and start recognizing them as the solid ground on which we can build something extraordinary. Today, I challenge you to do something radical. Look at the part of your story you've been hiding, the failure, the mistake, the rock bottom, and ask yourself, what if this isn't my shame, but my superpower? Then take one small step toward owning it. Share it with someone you trust. Write about it. Use it to help someone facing a similar struggle. Because when you rise from your ashes, you light the way for others to do the same. And in a world where so many are suffering in silence, your comeback story might be exactly the hope someone else needs to begin theirs. Remember what Monic Harrish taught us: your past does not define your future. Embrace humility as fuel for growth and live unapologetically in your truth. The ground beneath your feet might crumble. You might find yourself in the ashes. But remember, that's exactly where phoenixes are born.